We are? Okay, great. Well, good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And it is a real treat to welcome my good friend, dear friend, Sara Gran, back to the Poison Pen. She's going to be talking about her amazing new collection called Little Mysteries. And so please help me welcome Sara. Yeah.
Thank you for my fifth visit to the Poison Pen,
yeah.
as we were just discussing. And this is the highlight of every tour, is coming here. You have the best readers, the best staff, and I get to see you and your lovely wife.
Well, it's always great to have you here. And tell us a little bit. I mean, I'm gonna grill her on all sorts of things, so prepare yourself. But let's talk a little bit about Dreamland Books, because we haven't really had a chance to talk about it.
That's true.
Yeah.
My last book we were just talking was during COVID, and I did the event from home over Zoom, and I had a broken leg, so I didn't go anywhere. I did all my events from my sofa. So I started Dreamland Books in 2023 was the first book, my last book, which is the Book of the Most Precious Substance. And then this is the second one, Little Mysteries. And it's been great. I had always had this dream of sort of publishing my own work and starting my own publishing house. Eventually I'll do other writers as well. And it's been really hard. I've made a ton of mistakes. I've done so much wrong, but it's been very gratifying. I like making mistakes. It's fun.
Well, I know that, I mean, I admire what you've done, because you've really kind of gone outside of the big, cartel publishing system. And this, if I'm not mistaken, was your most successful book to date.
It was, yeah. That was my best-selling book to date.
Wow.
Yeah. But so far, Little Mysteries is selling kind of slow, to be honest. So, it's like you can't solve all of your problems.
Right.
Some problems are still going to exist, and things are still going to be hard. But the challenge of doing it yourself means that if you make mistakes or things don't sell as well, you can learn from it and do things differently next time.
Right. Well, tell us a little bit about this wonderful new collection. And I know it was partially informed by, at the afterword, you talk about the various writers that were Carolyn Keene, and R.A. Montgomery, and Donald Sobel, of course, who did the Encyclopedia Brown.
And the 2-Minute Mysteries.
And the 2-Minute Mysteries, right.
Yes.
Right.
And I'm not a big Encyclopedia Brown fan.
No?
He's kind of an asshole. I'm not sure if we're going live. I don't know what I can say, if I can use my usual language.
Please.
Okay, yeah. Encyclopedia Brown is a little asshole. He's like, I solved the mystery. Look at me. But the 2-Minute Mysteries were kind of what got me hooked on mysteries when I was a kid. And it was these books where it would have like a little mystery and then the solution. The solution was upside down at the end, which I wanted to do for this book, but I couldn't because the solutions were too long. Like, it didn't work typographically. But just something about that idea is still very like exciting to me. The idea that there's like the little mystery and then they have the solution. And then if you want to know how they solved it, you have to turn the book upside down and read it.
And for those of you who have a book there is a wonderful little tool at the beginning, the
Yes.
Psychospiritual divination.
It is
tool.
Guaranteed to be 100% accurate.
It's right here, and you can see all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so much fun.
Yes. If it's inaccurate, I will fix the life choices that you made based on that. If it doesn't work, I will show up in your life. If you got married based on it and the marriage isn't working, I will come to your house and get you guys sorted.
Well, I mean, kind of essential. I guess a good place to start is what does mystery, the word mystery has all these different connotations and different layers and different, it's a fascinating word.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that it's misused and misidentified most of the time?
Maybe unexploited is a better way to put it. Like the depth and richness of it is kind of not accessed, because it's mystical, mysterious. There's so many more, words that have the same etymology of the thing that is unknown. The mysteries of the cross, right? The stations of the mystery in the Catholic Church. Yeah, so I think it's a word that has a lot of depth and richness. It's sort of hiding in plain sight.
And you said somewhere in the book that I was intrigued by this line. It was, the case is not the mystery, and the mystery is not the crime. So you make a clear distinction between these three different things: the case, the mystery, and then the crime itself.
Yeah. I've gotten really into psychoanalysis over the past like 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, it started like 15 years ago. And then for 5 years, I actually go to a psychoanalytic therapist. I don't do psychoanalysis where you just talk and they don't say anything. It's regular therapy, but it's Lacanian psychoanalytic therapy. And I've just read more about it. It's become more of like a worldview that I find useful. We were just talking about books that I'm going to be publishing. I'm going to be publishing a Freud book later this year. Yeah, like a sort of adulterated version of Studies on Hysteria. But I think that's like this psychoanalytic concept of like there's the thing that happens, or it's also a very philosophical postmodern concept, right? There's the thing that happens and then what the thing means. And then what it means is going to be different for everyone. And then there's like what was really going on, like what was the real transaction that was happening there. You go to... I've been very obsessed lately with how things are automated and it's awful because they don't quite work, right? Like you go to get a cup of coffee and instead of like having an encounter with a person, you like use the machine and the machine never quite works. And then you have like this monumental pressure of the tip. And like you can have all my fucking money. That's not the problem with the tip thing. The problem with the tip thing is that it's like a weird extra question and an extra step. And I think that's why people get so frustrated. Not because they're cheap and don't want to tip, although I'm sure some people are. But what used to happen before that was you would have more of an exchange with a human being. And of course, there's a literal exchange. You're giving them money and you're getting coffee or whatever. I don't drink coffee. But there was always something else that was happening. And what is that? I don't know. It's different every time. It's different to everyone. It's different. It's hard to put into words. And sometimes it's not good. Sometimes you don't like the exchange with the coffee person. Sometimes it's an unsatisfying encounter. But I think we gain things from friction as well. So it's like in that case, like the crime, so to speak, would be I want the coffee, the exchange of money for coffee. The mystery would be kind of what is actually going on here. And then the case would sort of be like the whole encounter.
Right. And of course, we have some characters like Claire DeWitt and her assistant Claude, who have roles in this book. And there's lots of different, there's a really interesting play on the classic manor house sort of mystery in the book. But then underneath it, some of the mysteries are, what the fuck are we doing here? What is the meaning of life?
Yeah.
You really get into bigger questions in the books. Let's see. And one thing I wanted to bring up is the notion of what makes a detective. I've always been attracted to this idea. And I can't remember who said it first, but it was like the good detective doesn't work the case works the detective.
Oh, I don't think I heard that
kind
one.
of like that.
That's really good, yeah.
Yeah, kind of interesting. And, of course, in the Claire DeWitt novels, there's that Jacques Sillette. It's almost when I was reading this collection, it almost reminded me of a lineage. And there's a very...
That's very intentional.
I remember years ago I asked you about Claire DeWitt. Is there an element of the bodhisattva in Claire DeWitt? And this sort of, the detective and, the writer, the artist, there's this almost element of sacrifice, Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit, or?
I think you just said it all. Yeah, just kidding. Yeah, no, there is that element for sure. This idea of like a lineage, whether that's like a spiritual lineage or an intellectual lineage or being part of a literary tradition, that's very much what the book is about. I think one reason why writers are always so drawn to detectives is because it sort of mimics writing a book. Like you're trying to figure out what the fuck you're doing, right? Like you don't know when you're writing a book. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and then somehow it's done and the mystery is solved. But then I think also it's for readers and why it endures and why it never goes away and why kind of everything is more interesting if you put it in the form of a mystery. Like when you watch the news, they're like a medical mystery from blah, blah, blah. It's a format that people are attracted to.
This is a real whodunnit.
Exactly. And then things turned more sinister, but I think it's a metaphor, a stand-in, a parable of what life is. Like you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what your mystery you're trying to solve, You're just sort of muddling your way from clue to clue to clue in life. And I think and I was also talking to someone the other day about how mysteries are sort of an anxiety relieving machine. Because in life you have these clues and you have these things to do and you go and you go and you get anxious about it. whether you have clinical anxiety or not, the normal anxiety of humanity. Again, should I marry this person is a good question. Although now we have a tool to solve that problem for you, but you don't know if you're making the right decisions, and then and you never know if you made the right decisions sometimes. But in a detective story, there's just a solution and it's solved. So you have anxiety and then it's relieved in a way that it never is in real life.
Do you think that may be why there's been this kind of resurgence of interest in the traditional sort of Agatha Christie type mystery?
Yeah, I mean, those seem to come back on a regular basis. It would be interesting. I bet someone's done this.
During chaotic times.
Yeah, if someone's tracked them, like how people track skirt lengths with, economic
Yeah.
sociologists or literary theorists or whatever,
Right.
to see when those kind of come into style and come out of style. They originated probably with Edgar Allan Poe, which was, 1850 something, The Gold Bug.
He was so, reading his stuff going back, he was so wildly ahead of his time.
So ahead of his time.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people think of Sherlock Holmes, right? But they don't really realize that Edgar Allan Poe did everything first.
Lupin. And
Yeah. All the Dupin stories are sort of the origination. And, you can always, I'm sure someone will call, and I hope someone does, it would be interesting, and say there was one that came first or there was this that came first,
Right.
Firsts are both interesting and another mystery you will never solve.
Were you aware he wrote this weird exegesis called Ezekiel? Have you ever come across that?
No. What's that
Yeah.
about?
I don't know. Sandra made her way through it. Sandra's a huge Poe
Okay.
fan.
Now I want to read it.
Yeah, I'll give you a copy of it. I think we have
Oh, yeah,
it.
okay.
But
I always leave with some good books when I see you and Sandra.
Yeah. For me, it's funny. I love the subtitle.
Thank you.
9 miniature puzzles to confuse, and confuse is the key for me.
Yeah.
To confuse, enthrall, and delight.
Yeah.
It seems like.
But hopefully you were a little delayed.
Yeah. No. Totally.
That was not convincing, guys.
But going back to the thing about, there's almost this Eastern sensibility about the role of the detective.
Yeah.
It's like, is the mystery, in many ways, it reminded me a little bit of a Zen koan.
Yeah.
Often, so accurate.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I first started the series, which was about 2007, was when I started writing it. And I had like a really intense yoga practice at the time. And I had some dabbling in like different Buddhist practices, but mostly it was yoga. I was really, really deep into it. And over the years, my thoughts have changed so much. And I think that's one reason why writing the next Claire DeWitt book has been hard, is because it was but I'll get there. And I have a couple that I've been working on. None of them are done. But my point of view has changed. And that's one reason why I wanted to do a series, is because I wanted to see how a character would change as I changed. But now that I'm actually living that, I'm like, oh, this is hard. Why did I do this? This was a terrible idea. If only I had had the tool of psychospiritual divination to help me realize what a terrible decision I was making. But yes, they were very much informed by this really, really specifically Eastern point of view. And now I feel like enlightenment, what a bullshit, uninteresting concept. What a ridiculous thing to spend your life looking for. And this idea of being sort of, the idea of Maya, the idea that the real world is the immaterial world. My thoughts have completely changed on that. Now I feel like all of that is sort of, it's real, but who cares? The real world is the material world. Not in the sense of like money and fast cars materialism, but like other people, life, the human body. That to me is that's the thing you only get if everything is true and we will live on for many, eons or whatever. This is the thing that's brief and fleeting and you should focus on and be committed to. So that kind of fucks that whole series. I don't know.
Well, yeah. I guess this is more of a question about writing in general. I mean, I've heard you speak a little bit on that subject before, and I was intrigued getting back to that whole idea of the sacrificial element.
Yeah.
Of going really deep inside yourself to pull this material out. And I was going to say, I first became aware of Sarah's work with this book, Come Closer, which has become a real classic. And
That means I'm old.
but I was going to share a little story about Come Closer.
Oh,
Is
yeah,
that
the story.
I have to find, when people come in, you have to find the right person to recommend the book to. And I've recommended, and one lady brought it back and said, "I don't want this in my house."
Oh.
And I said, what a
I don't blame
that's
her.
what a great
Huge
review.
compliment.
She
yeah.
liked it.
Yeah, but tell her I
She
said
liked it, but she
thank
was
you.
afraid to have it in the house.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, legitimate.
Huge compliment.
I think that's
yeah. Yeah. That's very meaningful to know that you wrote something that affected someone that much.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So I'm interested in just out of my own curiosity, tell me a little bit about writing Come Closer, and where were you in your life? Were you still in Brooklyn at that time?
Yes, I was still in Brooklyn. Yes. I lived in I'm from New York City. So I lived in all these parts of New York City sort of before gentrification. So I lived in Williamsburg, which now sounds like la-di-da. I lived in horrible neighborhoods in Williamsburg. And genuinely scary shit happened all the time when I lived in Williamsburg. This was like early 90s through late 90s. And like at one point in this apartment, the ceiling fan fell down. It was such a bad apartment. It was horrible. $700 a month, by the way. So it was all good, all worth it. I could work part-time in a bookstore. 700, I think, maybe 775.
Wow.
So this is the 90s. Yeah.
That's crazy.
My life was not good at all. I had published my first book. It had sold like 200 copies probably. I just made that number up. I don't know the number. When this book came out, it sold like 1,000 copies, Come Closer. It sold like no copies, maybe 1,000 in the first year. It was a horrible seller. But anyway, back to the writing it. Yeah, I think I was scared of a lot of things. I didn't realize it at the time, so I decided to kind of dive in and write what I was most scared of in terms of I have still never watched The Exorcist all the way through. That's still a terrifying concept to me.
Yeah, we're both friends and fans of James Salas, the writer, wonderful writer, and just kind of getting back into the digging deeply into yourself, and Salas had that great line about write about the things that scare you, and write about the things that you don't understand.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
When did you first kind of start accessing that real deep inside part of you? Was it from the very beginning, or did it take a lot of scraping to get there?
I think it took a lot of scraping, and I think it was with Come Closer. I think that was sort of the way in. Like, I'm proud of the first book that I wrote. I like it, but it wasn't really... Although that book was about a very particular fear, which was losing my mother. The book was about someone whose mother is dying and they pass away, which was always a big terror of me. Now it's over. It happened, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
But it's over. Yeah, she's gone.
Right.
So that involved some digging deeper, but more so with every book for sure. But I think I'm done. That's it. I've dug as deep. Not that deep anymore. Kind of got it all out. Just kidding.
I beg to differ. I think there's a lot of deep material. And then I want to talk about I know you're a lover of antiquarian books.
Oh, yeah.
And you've done a lot of collecting and the character, of course. There's a lot of that in this book.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your kind of book history.
My book history is I've always been a huge reader. I grew up in a house that was full of books. I was very fortunate that my parents were big readers and very into books. And they also both read everything. My mother would pick up some like literature one day and then like a diet book the next day. And my dad read detective novels, but he also read a lot of like Richard Ford and Saul Bellow. And, they just read across the spectrum. There was no sense of like, you shouldn't read this, you shouldn't read that. The only book I was not allowed to read was Forever by Judy Blume. It's very explicit. And I was like 10 maybe. And my older sister was reading it. And my mom was like, no, of course I read it anyway. But that's literally the only time I remember my parents saying, you can't read that. I mean, it has like actual dick in it. Like it's really explicit. And yeah, they let me, within financial constraints, buy whatever I wanted in the bookstore. There were no like taste constraints or morality constraints, just like, no, you can't spend $1 million. And they didn't care if it was the same things that they were interested in. It was just like reading is good. Also they were fucking nuts and they didn't want to deal with a kid a lot of the time. So if I was off reading, it was a good thing, you know?
Were they all, both of them, kind of intellectuals and professor? They were
No,
professors?
no. My dad taught architecture, but he also had an architecture practice. He was a practicing architect. He also
Okay.
taught at Pratt for many years. He was a tenured professor there.
Oh.
And my mom was like just a wonderful, crazy alcoholic woman who sat around and read all day. She had worked in the New Yorker when she was young in the 60s. She was like an assistant to a lot of different writers. She'd had a bunch of jobs like that seemed like they would lead to a writing. She was a brilliant writer. She write these short stories and then never show them to anyone or do anything with them. Yeah, they were just nuts. But I miss them terribly. They're gone now.
So, growing up, were you a collector as a
Yes,
kid?
back to the books. Yes, I was always a collector of everything. And it's, I've had to really pare back recently.
Really?
I don't like to throw anything away, let alone a book that I love. Pardon. So then when I worked at a lot of bookstores. And then I worked at a secondhand bookstore called Housing Works in New York City, which is all donations. It's for Housing Works, which provides housing for people with HIV/AIDS, for homeless people with HIV/AIDS. It's a very, very good organization. A lot of nonprofits are just horse shit, and this one is not, by the way. When I was there, again, back to the 90s, I remember I worked there during 2001. So it's like late 90s, early 2000s. The people running it made like $40,000 a year, which was not a lot of money even back then, It was a real nonprofit. So many today, the leaders are making $1 million and nothing actually goes to people. They actually provided a huge number of services. So it was really felt good to work there. But the rare book person there, whose name is Nancy Cooper, perhaps she's watching this. She's on Facebook. I don't know why I'm looking at that screen. That's not her. She really took me under her wing. And I had always been interested in rare books and wanted to learn more. And she really let me work with her part-time instead of in the general stacks of the bookstore. And she really got me started learning how to identify a first edition, how to kind of smell a rare book, and that's what it is. If you're in the business, you just know, like, it's a smell, not a literal smell, of course. You can look at two books, you can be like, I think that one someone's going to pay a lot of money for. So then after I left that job, I got really into it. I would sell like medium rare books, as they say, myself, like $100 books. And that book, The Book of the Most Precious Substance, is about like the 100,000 books, the $1 million books that I have no experience with. Other than, going to look at them in museums. Yeah. I go to the book shows and look at them sometimes. But
it's fascinating. I mean, when you get to the level of, as you say, these multi-$1,000 books, there's that, and David, who's here tonight, he worked at the Strand.
I worked at the Strand. Oh, really? When? What year?
Until 4 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So
I worked there in like 95 to 98, maybe. Not rare books, though. I did paperback sorting. But doing paperback sorting at the Strand was like the education to top all book educations. Because like maybe 300 books a day would pass through your hands. So even though people think I'm so well read, no, I just sorted 300 paperbacks a day for 3 years. And so I know like author and title of hundreds and hundreds of books that I have not read.
Right. I mean,
I've actually never read a book.
I feel, sometimes I feel that way too. It's like
being
in this business for so long,
yes.
It's like, my brain is full of all this data, but
right. It's not the same as having read the books, but it's something. And it's something that's useful and interesting. But it's not the same as having read a book, but it's a good thing.
But the idea in this book especially, of the kind of the power of a book to unlock something.
Yeah.
And in this case, to also contain a bit of a curse, I think it's a fascinating subject.
Yeah, it's something I come back to over and over again. And someone pointed out to me all of my books have a book in them, which is not intentional. I don't know why I do that. It's another one for the Lacanian therapist. It's another one for my psychoanalytic therapy. But yeah, there is this thing of like a book having this magical power, whether it's like in the money you can make from selling it, or reading it is going to change something in you, or writing it is going to change something in you. I can never get past that.
Or you might just die by reading, you might die from reading the book.
It happens
Um,
every day.
Yeah, yeah.
But I guess, right, like when you said that, it made me think, I guess other people think that too, like with all the people who want to ban books. It's always been a dream to have someone ban one of my books, because it's like they're saying that this is powerful, right? That it's important, Every time like the new lists come out of the books they're trying to ban, I'm like looking for my name in there.
Well, I love it when that stuff, and it always backfires
No.
beautifully. It brings so much more attention to the work. and-
Yeah, it's also be fucking killer for sales,
yeah,
right?
You should just put banned book.
I know. I should
Even
just
though
ban
it's
my own
not.
book. Call the libraries. I heard that one has.
Yeah, right.
Call some library in Georgia or whatever. I love Georgia, but
Yeah. But I mean, getting back to the new book, the new collection, there's so many treats and treasures in
Thank you.
here, and one of my favorite is the Father Billy character in the book. He tells a tale in one of these stories about the story of these two women ministering to the animals in Central Park.
yeah.
Love that.
Thank you. A lot of the stories in here started off as Christmas stories,
Really?
including that one. Were you on my list for what I did for like 3 or 4 years in a row? Is I would send out a Christmas story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
you must have been on that list. And I was worried people would notice that there were a bunch of Christmas stories in the book. Luckily, no one did. So, of course, I've pointed it out on every occasion. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure what that Christmas connection is. But that one is a Christmas story. It takes place on Christmas Day.
Right. And
Part of it was being home. This is obviously before I lost my parents. I would be home, sitting in my teenage bedroom with my husband at the time. They're all gone now, my parents and my husband. And, it's a weirdly inspiring, emotional place to be. And so I would write these Christmas stories.
Yeah. Yeah, Bobby.
Yeah, my late husband.
Yeah, what a wonderful guy.
Thank you. He
Yeah.
loved you.
Yeah, we were simpatico in some way. I'm not sure what it was, but
That was something deep. Yeah, we were just talking about my husband had a degenerative disease called Huntington's disease. So he faded away over the years, and one of his last good days was with Patrick.
So Claire DeWitt. Let's
Yeah.
get back to Claire.
Yes.
And she figures very prominently in this new book.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about Claire for the people who aren't familiar with who she is and
Yes. So I have 3 previous Claire DeWitt books that are detective novels. She's the
Right.
best detective in the world who has some sort of unusual methods and who is not necessarily widely trusted or admired, but solves almost every case. There's
is
a few
nice and-
unsolved ones, as
and
we
is
will find in the next book.
self-destructive.
I don't think so.
No?
I would say has an unusual approach to life.
There you go.
I get that. This is a conversation I have with people a lot. That I think that sometimes people make choices like, I'm going to take a lot of drugs. I'm going to go do this for a while that seem self-destructive, but they can be exactly what you need at that time.
Well, I think what I was really thinking was sacrificial in a way.
Yes, I think that's a better way to put it.
Yeah,
That's a good
'cause
way to put it.
she
You're back
goes-
to the sacrifice idea, which I dig. Yeah.
Yeah, she was going through this kind of journey.
Yeah, there's like, this is a bit trite, but there's that sort of Jungian concept of like the shaman is like a wounded healer,
Mhm.
right? As someone who has been to sort of dark places and can come back and tell you the story. Or like with that character, I think about the Persephone myth from Greek mythology a lot. That Persephone, most people will know, went into the underworld. She got kidnapped by her uncle who wanted to marry her. Ew, gross on all levels, but she was trapped in the underworld, but then was allowed to come back up. But when she came back up, she was a different person, of course. She had changed. So there's a book, I think the author's name is Tanya Wilkinson, and I think it's out of print, but it's easy to find, called Persephone Returns, that I was very into when I wrote the first Claire DeWitt book.
Okay.
That's about, this is before the word trauma was so overused. This was, I had just been in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. So when I talk about trauma, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's good that language changes and evolves, but the problem is then that you lose the original meaning. So trauma has come to mean so many, like a bad day or something that hurt my feelings. And it's good that people have a word for that, but what's lost is that trauma is, we now need a new word for horrible things that happen
Right,
to
right.
people, for like things that, and then there's the original Freudian sense of the word, which is not just a bad thing that happens, but a bad thing that happens that you cannot move on from. Sometimes bad things happen, and after an appropriate amount of time, which might be 5 years, you can move on. But sometimes bad things happen and you cannot move on. So anyway, so that's what this book that's called Persephone Returns is about. And that was a big influence in shaping this character. And in writing the first book, which takes place in New Orleans after Katrina, and it's very much about how do people move on or not move on after these horrible, horrible things happen. That kind of trauma that is overtly horrible, but also hits something personal in you that makes it. No one comes out like great after a hurricane, but for some people, for me, it picked up on some survivor's guilt and some other bad feelings that I had that made it difficult to move on.
You got your cat?
Yeah, as you're discussing, my cat is also gone. So many dead people are coming up in this. Dead cats, dead people. Cats count as people, I think, in our world.
Right.
Patrick has 1,000 cats. Yeah.
It's a slippery slope. Yeah.
She was a Katrina kitty we
Yeah.
found right after Katrina, who had been born during the evacuation, probably during the storm, actually.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So then you moved from New Orleans up to the Bay Area, right? From
Yes.
there, and then so the second Claire DeWitt is set up there in
Yes.
San Francisco,
Yes.
right?
So she still lives in San Francisco. I do not. I never lived in San Francisco. I lived in a few places near San Francisco.
Alameda, right?
Yes, I saw you in Alameda, and then I lived up in Sebastopol, which is in West Sonoma County, near Bodega Bay. So it's Hitchcock country is how I always describe it.
Right.
And now I live in L.A., but Claire still lives in San Francisco.
Talk about L.A. I mean, you love the city, don't you?
I don't know. One thing I love about L.A. is that it's a city no one really loves. That's one thing that's actually great about it. That's one thing that has completely over the Bay Area. People in the Bay Area are so fucking smug. That's one thing I don't like about it. People in San Francisco think they live in the best place in the world, and they're so much better than the rest of the country. Everyone in LA is like, yeah, this place is kind of a shithole. That's what I love about it. It's like, yeah, it doesn't really function. Like, the streets don't really make sense. The traffic is obviously, like, historically just nightmarish. The public transportation is and there's homeless situation is completely out of control, and the billions of dollars just evaporate into thin air every year. But there's something good about it. New York used to be like that. New Orleans used to be like that. I like a city that's like, yeah, we just don't really function. I prefer that to smugness.
And then Sarah's done a lot of TV work over the years.
Yes.
Southland, was that your first big gig?
The first and the best, yeah.
And the best.
That's the best show I've written for sure.
Really?
Yes.
What else have you done? I know you did Berlin Station.
I did Berlin Station, which is a really good show. I've done really good shows. I've mostly done development, which is where you come up with an idea for a show and they pay you to write it and then they don't make it. Which sounds like a crazy way to run a business, but when you understand how much production costs, it actually makes a lot of sense financially. The price of a film set is like $30,000 to $50,000 an hour with all the crew and everything.
Wow.
So then you're like, oh, it actually makes sense that they just paid me some money to write the script and then made it the next decision after that. So that's most of what I do is write things that only like 10 people read and never get made, which is a really weird way to make a living.
Huh.
And I did Southland, which was such a good show. I'm really proud to have been a part of that. I did Berlin Station. I did a show called Chance on Hulu with Hugh Laurie. That was really great to be a part of. And
Chance,
and then,
you said?
yes.
Was that based on the Kem Nunn?
Yes, it was.
book?
You must know Cam. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
great
based-
writer.
Yeah, he was in the room on that show.
Really?
Yeah. Yes.
Interesting character.
Very interesting guy. Very interesting life that he's had.
Yeah.
And then a lot of development, and I had a pilot that got made that, again, no one saw. We made a whole entire pilot, and like 20 people saw it, with David Slade, who's a great horror director for HBO Max. And it was absolutely beautiful. He did a wonderful job. No one will ever see it.
What about Claire DeWitt? I understand any chance of seeing her on the screen?
No, because I won't option it. I did a script based on the Claire DeWitt show once. I got a nice piece of option money. I wrote a script. I worked with really great people. And I was just like, I don't want to do this. I'll do it someday if I need the money enough. I have not since then, but you never know. We all need money sometimes. But I would strongly prefer those to just remain books.
Yeah.
I don't want to see someone else's version of it, because TV is a collaborative art. And you cannot go into it and say, I'm going to have it my way and do my thing. That's just not what it is. It's a collaboration. And I think that's where a lot of novelists get frustrated, when they make that transition to TV.
Right.
It's not your vision, it's a group vision. And I don't want a group vision for that character. I don't want a group vision for those books. I want it to remain my vision.
Yeah.
But we all need money sometimes. We'll see what happens. Hopefully not. I would love them to just remain books.
Do you have plans for her coming up again? Are you going to bring her back?
Yes, I have a couple things I've been working on, and it's been hard. I really dug myself into a hole in a lot of ways, both with this character sort of like personal, psychological, spiritual evolution, which we talked about a little bit earlier, which I sort of would like to mirror mine, and how to do that while keeping this character her and not me, but also how has she changed over the years? It's been 15 years, She can't be the same person. I'm not the same person. No one's the same person as they were 15 years ago.
Has it been that long?
Roughly. I just kind of no, it's been more than that. Well, the first book came out in 2011, but I started writing it in like 2007. It took me like 3 years to write it and then a couple years to publish it.
Right.
So more than that.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Where does the time go?
Right?
Yeah.
What happened to us?
So any questions?
That's a good question. Yes, there's a story that is in 2 columns, and it is has a very long title. Will you find the title?
Yeah.
I don't remember who wrote this thing. And that's my favorite. It's sort of a comparison. One story takes place in the early days of COVID, and the other takes place in the early days of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And it's sort of about how those 2 time periods felt very similar.
It's The Good Smell of New York City.
/
That's the 1988 part. And then The Ocean Salted Air.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. I think that's my favorite because it was the 2-column format was a really fun and interesting challenge to take on. And also, I don't think I had seen anyone sort of conceptualize the link, which to me was so strong between those time periods, both of which were hugely influential on me. I grew up in, as I mentioned, New York City, kind of coming of age sexually when HIV/AIDS was just coming out in the world, and people didn't know, you kind of knew how you got it, but you didn't entirely know. And it was terrifying. And it was a huge impact on me. And then, of course, COVID was a more universal experience, but it was very similar of this. I don't know how you get it, but I know that I don't want it. But I also know that I don't want to live my whole fucking life alone in a room. Although if I had to write it over again, I would, because I wrote that story a couple years ago, I would include how judgmental people were, both cases on all sides. One thing that was really, there's nothing like good about AIDS. One thing that was great about AIDS, but one thing that was good about having been present for one of the epicenters of the disease was you learned that a virus is not a moral anything. And that like even if someone got it because like they really fucked up and did something stupid, that doesn't mean that they're like a bad person or they deserve to die. Like, people reach out for human connection and human contact, and they don't do things that scare them, and they move towards each other. And like a lot of that got lost during COVID. People like wished death on each other on all sides of, the issues around it. And I find that abhorrent. And I was grateful that I had this exposure to that idea earlier in life, that a virus is morally neutral. It's not like punishing anyone for anything. Like even if I'm very happy to be fully vaccinated, but if someone made the choice, which I think is the wrong choice, not to get vaccinated, I don't want them to die because of it. I don't think it's like funny or amusing if they, I don't wish death on anyone. Yeah. It's not a leftist value, and it's not a way to live your life.
Right. One of my favorite titles is Choose Your Own Heartbreak.
Oh, yeah.
Which was done to the Choose Your Own Adventure kind of format.
Yes.
That must have been a blast writing that.
It was a blast. I totally fucked it all up. Ed Brubaker is a friend of mine who I think I introduced you to. I keep telling him to send you a big box of books. And I send it to friends, and I send it to him, and he's like, yeah, this doesn't work like the page numbers at first. So he had to help me figure out all the page numbers of, no, if you turn to page 8, it's not page 8, it's page whatever. So there's a lot of math involved, which, like most writers, it's not my strong suit.
And then Cynthia Silverton and Charnel House Grounds is taken from Infinite Blacktop,
Yes,
right?
I had to pay Simon and Schuster $1,500 to reprint
Really?
my own story. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. That is why I started my own publishing company, because I want all of my rights forever and ever and ever. But
Now-
they were nice about it, and they let me do it. Thank you, Simon and Schuster. They
I
could
mean,
have said
they're-
no.
You're in for such a treat when you read this collection.
Thank you.
There are a bunch of notes I made, but the last bit, and this is a great title. It's 10-second mystery. How you never seem to get exactly what you want, but somehow time moves monstrously forward anyway. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It does, doesn't it?
it sure does.
Yeah.
It sure does.
That's all.
It sure does.
That's the shortest story, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did all these like X-minute mysteries. I did not want to do 2-minute because that is Donald J. Sobel's thing. So there's like a 5-minute, I think a 1 minute, and then the 10-second. I don't remember.
So did you encounter all these when you were a kid or more as an adult?
As a kid.
As a kid.
The 2-minute mysteries as a kid were a huge deal to me. Choose Your Own Adventure was huge to me as a kid. And then Nancy Drew I did not read as a kid. I've only read a few as an adult, but it was very much sort of in the air and in the ether, you know,
Right.
always. Of course, they're such famous books.
Definitely. Now, did you always read crime fiction? I'm sure you've read all sorts of different things growing up, but were you exposed to kind of classic crime stuff?
Yeah. Well, you know, I've seen before my parents were such big readers, and my father was very into old crime fiction. My parents were a bit older. My dad was a big film noir fan.
Oh.
It wasn't really called a film noir back then. I mean, I know that was the term, and it comes from, the 40s or 50s from France, obviously. I think it was coined in, 1950 maybe. I don't know. But, you know, to him, it was just like old movies. He didn't
Crime
have, a
movies.
film. Yeah, Casablanca was his favorite movie, you know? And do you know, of course you do, we're in a mystery bookstore, the Nero Wolfe books by
Sure,
Rex
of course,
Stout. People
of
know
course.
those. And my dad had all of them. I have them now. You know, when your parents die, you claim things, and it's really gross and weird. But and then I did it to my dad while he was still alive, because we both have a horrible sense of humor. And I'm like, the second you go, all those books are mine. I have his whole collection of Nero Wolfe books. He had every single one in paperback. But he also got all of the Barry Gifford Black Lizard Press books. Not all of them,
Oh,
but many
really?
of them. Because they were just books he remembered and loved. He was not into literary culture at all.
Okay.
That was not interesting to him. He just loved to read. And he saw some of his favorite books being reprinted and would buy them.
Well, that's, you know, that Black Lizard, the first iteration of
Yes.
that in the 80s.
Yes.
You know, I mean,
So
it's
for
hard.
people who don't know, Barry Gifford, the writer,
Yep.
the screenwriter of Wild at Heart, he started Black Lizard Press as, I think, just old hobby. You
I
know,
think it was
bringing
just
these
a labor-
incredible books back into print, these incredible crime novels from the
Right. It's
30s,
kind of
40s, 50s.
a labor of love. You
Yeah.
know? And it's hard to think about it, but the Jim Thompsons and David
Mm-hmm.
Goodis's, those at that time they were all forgotten writers.
And
You know?
crime fiction in general was kind of shit on.
Yeah.
Reading a mystery was a little bit embarrassing back then, and that was part of the appeal to me. I don't want to. I like the things that are a little shameful.
Well,
You
and
know,
there
I
was-
mean, culturally, not that there's anything genuinely shameful about them, you know, but that other people kind of I'm like, ooh,
Well, you know, I've been leading this discussion group here that's devoted to this kind of stuff, noir and hard-boiled,
oh, cool.
And,
Can I come?
for 20 years, and you know we've gotten through all the A-listers,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then we're down to the second, third, fourth tier
Who are you reading now?
who are really interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. You know, and even if the book isn't good,
yes,
you get these glimpses of society or the underbelly at that time.
Yes.
These little time capsules.
yes.
And that's what's really fun to read about.
Also, a lot of them, I'm really interested in pulp fiction in terms of writers who had to churn stuff out to make money, because that is kind of this direct line to the unconscious, right? When you don't have time to think, oh, what are people going to say? What are people going to think? You just have to get something on paper. So the only thing that's like that now is romance novels, and has been for a long time. But there isn't that kind of economy for churning out mystery novels anymore. There isn't enough of a market for it. The only market that's left to churn out books like that is romance. So they kind of have that direct line to the unconscious. So they are really interesting on that same level.
That's fascinating because, the gold medal paperbacks and things
Yep.
like that. What you're talking about really resonates because, you think about it, they wanted product fast. They
Yes.
wanted, each week was a new list of crime paperbacks at these drugstores around
Yes.
America. Can
And
you imagine somebody walking into a drugstore and picking up a copy of The Killer Inside Me
ugh,
and saying, "Oh my God, what is this?"
that is back to that thing of like the book you pick up that changes your life, that opens something, some crazy door inside of you or to the world. And also, those writers had bills to pay. Like they were making a living from writing those books. They were not college professors teaching, postmodern literature.
And, probably the majority of it is not remembered today.
No, not at all. Have
But
you ever been to KO Books in San Francisco?
yeah.
It's a bookstore. It's almost as big as this, and it is all pulp fiction. And you will find things that you're like, what on earth?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I get off on my nerdy kind of
No, this is what I came here
pulpit
for.
because I love this stuff. And yeah. I mean, you think about these writers, like, as you say, there probably wasn't a whole lot of editorial oversight.
No.
And so you got these people like pursuing their own personal demons on the page.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
then cloaking that in a crime.
In a mystery.
Um,
Yeah, that's what we're all doing, buddy. Yeah.
Like definitely Goodis and a lot of those
Oh,
guys.
yeah. Yeah.
And you have to wonder if Thompson was aware of what he was doing. Or if it was
He
just,
was.
you think so?
Yes. On his deathbed, he said to his daughter, never sell my rights. They're going to be worth a fortune someday. And I think that indicates there's a biography of him by Robert Polito, which
Yeah,
I think I
that.
read, but it was like
Yeah.
1,000 years ago. I don't remember anything. But I think he did know. And I think him saying that to his daughter was he knew what he was doing.
Right.
And Raymond Chandler was very conscious about what he was
Absolutely.
doing. Dashiell Hammett was very conscious of what he was doing.
Right.
And I think a lot of them, what's his name who wrote Mike Hammer?
Spillane.
Not conscious at all. I mean, terrible writer, but also a brilliant writer, obviously.
It's interesting.
Brilliant in that you can't put them down, even though they're absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it's interesting to read the letters of a Chandler versus the letters of a Hammett. Chandler just bleeds all over the page in his letters.
And he was so devoted to this idea that what he was doing was literature.
Right.
And he said, I don't care about the mysteries. He said, I just want something to hang these stories on. By the way, he's the only writer good enough to do that. No one else is good enough to do that. I say that as a cautionary tale. If you're writing mysteries, you better care about the fucking mystery. He's the only person who can get away with the mystery making absolutely no sense. He's my favorite. But in The Long Goodbye, it just makes no sense.
Right.
Like there's no client, nothing happens. Why are you so obsessed with this guy? It's super gay, which is awesome. But none of it makes any sense. Like it's just about his gay crush on Terry Lennox. But
it's a wonderful LA novel because there's so much, it captures the weirdness of LA.
Yes.
His books do that so well.
Yes.
That sort of surreal. Sorry, we're going way off on a tangent here, but who cares?
Yeah, this is what we're here for. This is what I drove from LA for.
Who do you like to read now? Or who have you been reading?
I haven't been on a big fiction reading thing lately. No, I'm trying to think the last fiction book I read that was exciting to me. That's a tough one.
Do you get sent books for blurbing and all that stuff?
I get sent books literally every day between email and press, and I read almost none of them. I don't really like to read contemporary fiction. I will read in terms of blurbs, I try to get to it if it's a first-time author from a small press. Paul Auster had a policy of only blurbing small press books, which I think is a good policy. I don't think a blurb from me matters. People are always asking me for blurbs, and I'm like, no one's going to buy a book that has a blurb from me on the cover. It just doesn't matter. It's not worth anyone's time. Let's just all move on with our lives. I have been reading a lot of nonfiction about hysterias and the satanic panic and stuff like that.
Oh.
Debbie Nathan wrote a great book called Satan's Silence, I think. She wrote the book that came out about 5 years ago about Sybil, the real Sybil case.
Oh, really?
Yes, which
Wow.
was all horse shit, apparently. It was another sort of hysteria.
No kidding.
Yep. There was no 25 personalities or whatever. It never happened. So I've been reading a lot about that. The last mystery I read that I loved was a Kate Christensen book. The Arizona Triangle. I think that's what it's
Oh
called.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you must
yeah.
have that here. Is that out? Must have
I
come
think it's out.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Is it good?
Yeah, it's really good. You'll love it. It's very like deep into the place in New Mexico, and it's wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Anybody have any?
Oh yeah, I love Jane Eyre.
The question was, has she ever read Jane Eyre?
Yeah. Oh, that's one of my favorites. I love it when she gives that talk to her, the little like speech she gives to her. Is it her aunt? I will never forgive you. I will never love you. Know. I saw a film version of that, and they left that out. There's some version, and I'm like, you don't even know what the hell you're talking about. Like, I mean, because some classics, you're like, why am I reading this? And that is such a. It seems just as fresh if you're reading it today. I mean, that's a book I would like to read again. I've been reading a ton of classics. Actually, I guess that's what I've been reading that I've been into.
Classics.
I was talking to you about the Kreutzer Sonata, which I'm going to be publishing, Tolstoy, Zola, a bunch of things like that. That's what I like to read lately. Yes. How did it change you?
It just gave me so much more strength
Yes.
to pick relationships based on, you know, not upon weaknesses, but about, having that strength.
Yeah.
Say no,
Yes.
even though you felt so drawn to somebody, to be able
Yeah.
and to do whatever it takes to get away.
But then she comes back.
Then she comes back. But then he was the weak one, right?
Yeah. He was all blind and stumbling around, and yeah, I never thought about that aspect of it. But that's what's like so amazing about books and about any work of art is like it's obviously like a classic. Millions and millions of people have read that book. I never heard that being the thing that someone loved about it before. And I love that. That's wonderful. What I love about that book is just the character is so unpleasant and nobody likes her. Like, she's not good looking. She's not nice.
And she went through hell.
She went through hell. Nobody wanted her.
And everybody picked on her.
Her friend died. She got in trouble for having a curl in her hair or whatever. And she just goes on and she doesn't give a fuck. No one likes her. She's not good looking. She doesn't have any great big career. She's like a nanny. I mean, who did? 17, whatever. 18, whatever. And she just does not give a fuck. She's just like, I'm going to make the most of my life. I'm not. And then the guy wants to marry her. She's like, I don't want to marry you.
She almost starves, remember? She
No.
goes out, she leaves him and then she goes out into like the wilderness.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
And like she's begging for bread and
Right.
just like, yeah, even though she was in this big huge
Yes.
with this man that she broke away from him.
Yeah.
Remember his wife was
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, no, I'm so glad you brought it up. But I think that's actually really relevant to like everything that we've been talking about and to, the series that I write is I wanted to write a character like that who didn't give a fuck. I think that humans in general, but especially female humans, are often in fiction portrayed as like these people who just cannot make a decision, who cannot just kind of live their lives. The women I know aren't like that. I'm not like that. I don't want to write characters like that. I want to write people like Jane Eyre who do whatever the fuck they want and they pay the price for it, That's what's interesting to me.
I knew you'd have a good opinion on it.
Thank you. You have a good opinion on it too. Thank you for bringing it up.
It is, we were just talking to I can't remember who it was, but we were talking about, how you can go back and chart your own sort of intellectual growth by,
Oh, yeah.
and then I found this book.
Yes.
And that moved,
Yes.
that took me to here.
Yes.
And then I found this, this book, and that changed my life for a while.
Yes.
And it's amazing.
And then, I wish I could think of a better term than outgrow. That's sort of a shitty term. It makes it seem like you've gotten better for it. But a book's usefulness in your life, you kind of...
I mean, it spoke to you at a certain time.
Exactly. That's a better way to put it. And then
Yeah.
it stops speaking to you.
Yeah.
I don't want to name it because I'm going to say something not very nice about it. But there's an author who I love. He's a brilliant writer, a very important writer, still alive. And but one of his books in the 90s that I read that was so meaningful to me at the time, I'll tell you later. And I read it again recently, and I was like, oh, my God, this is not how I see things. A lot of the book is about sex, and the way it was written was so sort of twee and cute. And well, now I'm 53 years old, you know. And like, boy, that is not how I see sex at all now. I cannot believe this ever resonated with me on any level. And again, this person is still a brilliant writer, but
Yeah. There's always a danger of going back, you know, and looking at some of those books.
yeah, yeah. But at
But-
the time, it was just what I needed because it
Yeah.
was like explicit and open in a way that very few books are. And
Right, right. Well, Sarah, it's always a treat to talk with you. Thanks so much.
thank you so much.
Thanks.
This, as I said, the
Thank you guys
highlight of
for
every
coming out.
tour is the Poison Pen.
And everybody check out a copy of this online. We have signed copies. Wonderful book. And thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. The AV is here. AV Club is here to end the
AV.
show. The other Patrick.
Yeah. 2 for the price of 1.